I didn't know what was louder, the explosion in my barn or the shrieking voice of Karen screaming that I should be arrested for agricultural terrorism. One minute I was feeding hay to a newborn calf, and the next, I saw my tractor, my livelihood, up in smoke with Karen standing there like some twisted action movie villain, wielding a crowbar and yelling about morning serenity. She'd actually driven her golf cart through my fence and hammered the engine block of my custom tractor to death, proudly declaring she'd saved the HOA from rural noise pollution. What she didn't know was that the machine she just destroyed didn't just plow fields. It helped feed the entire town. And without it, everything was about to collapse. A few days earlier, I was living my usual life on the edge of the HOA boundary, close enough to hear them gossiping over white fences but far enough that their rules didn't technically touch my land. I ran a small family farm with high-output produce distribution. I wasn't just some hobby farmer growing carrots for Instagram. My crops supplied the school cafeteria, the senior center, 3 grocery stores, and the town's hospital kitchen. My name was known at the farmer's market and at the mayor's dinner table. But to Karen, none of that mattered. To her, I was just the guy who dared to start his tractor before 7 a.m. Karen had tried her usual HOA nonsense on me more than once. She'd sent me cease and desist letters with fake stamps, took photos of my cows and claimed they were wandering through common areas, and even once told a UPS driver not to deliver my seed shipment because I was in clear violation of community harmony. The problem was, Karen's HOA didn't cover my land. She just assumed that her self-declared authority extended as far as her eyesight. And apparently, my red tractor parked near the fence line was enough to send her into full-blown dictator mode. It started with small things. A scowl when I waved. A complaint filed to the zoning office, which was laughed out of the building. Then she escalated. A petition circulated among her HOA members claiming I was polluting the air. She'd added fake decibel readings and a wildly photoshopped picture of my tractor spewing black smoke like a volcano. The town ignored her. I laughed. She didn't. I should have taken the warning signs more seriously. That week, I'd heard from more than one neighbor that Karen had been asking if anyone had experience with legal noise abatement claims or land seizure due to community disruption. Someone even told me she was looking into ways to file an environmental impact complaint. I brushed it off. I figured the county had better things to do. I was wrong. The day it all went up in flames was a Tuesday. I remember that clearly because it was the morning I usually sent produce to the hospital's nutrition wing, where specialized diets for patients were mapped around what I supplied. I was loading fresh lettuce and arugula into a crate when I heard the unmistakable crash of metal against wood. I turned, just in time to see Karen's HOA-issued golf cart plow through my perimeter fence and skid to a stop in front of the barn. She had 2 other HOA members in the back. One filming on a phone, the other holding what looked like laminated bylaws. Karen hopped off like a suburban warrior and stormed the barn. I sprinted after her, shouting for her to stop. By the time I got there, it was too late. She was standing in front of my tractor with a crowbar, slamming it into the control panel like she was breaking open a piñata. Sparks flew, and I nearly tackled her, but she jumped back and screamed that I was threatening her. Her accomplice yelled that they were acting in the interest of peace and quiet. Then Karen shrieked her infamous line, "This is for everyone who deserves to sleep in on a Sunday." I stood in shock, staring at the shredded cables, the shattered touchscreen, and the dented engine cover. My tractor wasn't just expensive. It was custom-built for high-efficiency crop processing, and it was the only machine I had for large-scale operations. Without it, I couldn't run irrigation or till the next crop bed. Karen had effectively destroyed my entire planting cycle in under 5 minutes. The cops showed up, called by someone in the HOA who claimed I had trapped Karen in the barn. When they arrived, Karen proudly handed over a folder of fake documents she claimed gave her the right to intervene against environmental disruption. The officers looked bewildered but didn't arrest her. I asked if they could at least press charges for property destruction, but they said I needed to take it up in civil court. Karen smirked the entire time and left waving like she'd won an election. The fallout came faster than I imagined. That afternoon, I got a call from the school district asking where the produce truck was. I had to tell them there wouldn't be one this week. Then the hospital nutritionist called, worried because several of her patients relied on my ultra-fresh greens for recovery diet. I explained the situation, and she went silent before saying they'd try to make do with what was left in the storage rooms. Then came the grocery store manager, who wasn't nearly as understanding. He said the co-op was threatening to cancel the supply contract if I missed more deliveries. I explained again, then hung up and just sat on my porch, staring at the smoldering wreck of the tractor, the barn door still slightly ajar like a war zone aftermath. By sunset, my phone had blown up. Local restaurants were scrambling, school meal coordinators were panicking, and even the mayor's office reached out asking what the emergency was. It wasn't just one machine that had died. It was the artery feeding the town's daily nutrition. I stared at the fried engine and realized something horrible. Karen hadn't just cost me money. She had broken something the whole community depended on. She'd taken one look at my livelihood, decided it was inconvenient for her lifestyle, and swung a crowbar until it all came crashing down. And the worst part was, she still thought she was the hero of this story. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the footage from my newly installed security cameras and saw her face, wild with satisfaction, framed in the chaos of my barn. I replayed her words. "You'll thank me when it's quiet." But all I could hear was the sudden silence of a town about to starve if I didn't do something fast. And so I made a decision. If Karen wanted a war over noise, I was going to show her what silence really felt like when the food stopped growing. She wanted me quiet, but she was about to hear me loud and clear. The morning after Karen's rampage, I stood in the wreckage of my barn with a toolbox in hand and zero ideas about how to fix the situation. The sun was barely rising, casting gold across the splintered boards and oil-stained ground, and I already had 3 voicemails from the hospital nutritionist and one from the mayor's office asking for a meeting. I hadn't even had my coffee yet. My first instinct had been to call the sheriff again, but their response had been so tepid the day before, I doubted they'd do anything more now. What I needed wasn't sympathy, I needed a solution. And preferably one with 4 wheels, hydraulic arms, and a working alternator. By mid-morning, I had reached out to every farmer I knew within a 2-county radius. Some were sympathetic, some were outraged, but all of them were too busy or too strapped to lend out a tractor during peak planting season. The best offer I got was from a guy in Pine Bluff, who said I could borrow his ancient diesel unit if I drove 3 hours and brought my own fuel. Not ideal. The problem was, Karen hadn't just destroyed a tractor, she had sabotaged the rhythm of a farm ecosystem built over years of carefully timed cycles. Without my equipment, I couldn't irrigate on schedule, couldn't prep new beds, and couldn't make the critical first harvest of the month. The entire chain was grinding to a halt, and she didn't have a clue. Later that day, I got an email link from one of my friends in the town planning department. The subject line just said, "Thought you should see this." I clicked it, and it opened a video uploaded to a private HOA community site. It was Karen, standing in front of her white-trimmed house, giving what she proudly called a neighborhood emergency broadcast. She wore a pastel power suit and had printed flyers behind her taped to a hedge wall that read things like "No more noise" and "Reclaim the peace." In the video, she described her attack on my tractor as a spontaneous act of civic responsibility, claiming I was an unlicensed industrial polluter and that the HOA had been forced to act for the good of the neighborhood. Then she dropped the bomb. Karen had filed an application to the State Noise Regulation Board, backed by what she called documented evidence of extreme mechanical disruptions, along with a petition supposedly signed by multiple neighbors claiming they lived in fear of my tractor's early morning growls. Worse, she'd submitted a secondary filing to the local zoning office, arguing that my farmland was in violation of outdated noise compliance laws and that the HOA should be given temporary oversight until the matter was resolved. It sounded absurd, but to someone unfamiliar with how deeply rooted this farm was in town infrastructure, it might sound halfway credible. That's when I knew this wasn't about noise. Karen was trying to absorb my land into her HOA's jurisdiction. If she succeeded, they could slap me with daily fines, enforce ridiculous restrictions, and eventually force a sale. It was a hostile takeover dressed in petty grievances and pastel yard signs. I couldn't let that happen. Desperate for traction, I called Grandpa Earl. He was living in a retirement community about 45 minutes out, spending most of his time teaching other seniors how to cheat at poker and brewing questionable apple cider. When he picked up and I explained what happened, there was a long pause on the other end. Then he said 5 words I hadn't heard in years. "I'm bringing the big girl." 2 hours later, Earl showed up in a flatbed truck hauling a half-rusted but still functional beast of a tractor. It was one of the first models he'd ever owned, with massive rear wheels, a steel frame that looked like it had survived a war, and hand-crank ignition that required enough strength to dislocate a shoulder. He called her Big Girl. I called her my last hope. We spent the rest of the day getting her running. Earl cracked jokes about how Karen probably thought diesel fumes were a war crime. We both knew this old machine would never replace my custom tractor, but it would buy me time. Earl even brought an old flamethrower attachment. He said was for weed clearing, but looked like it could level a small shack. I had to convince him to leave that part in the truck. By dusk, I had at least one working tractor and a plan. But something kept bothering me. The way Karen had been so confident, so rehearsed. I couldn't shake the feeling she wasn't acting alone. That night, I set up new security cams facing the perimeter and installed motion sensors near the crop bed. If she or her cronies tried anything else, I'd be ready. That readiness paid off faster than I expected. Just after midnight, one of the motion sensors triggered an alert on my phone. I pulled up the camera feed and saw 2 figures sneaking along the north fence line. One held a clipboard, the other what looked like a tripod. They were placing strange devices in the ground, long rods with little boxes at the top. I watched as they planted one near the barn, another by the irrigation line, and then retreated toward the HOA streetlight where a black SUV waited. I got a good look at the license plate and even better, the face of one of the guys, a lanky teenager I recognized as Karen's nephew, Cody. I'd once seen him try to mow her lawn and nearly take out a mailbox. I downloaded the footage and backed it up 3 ways. The next morning, I took it straight to the mayor's office. He watched the video in silence, then leaned back in his chair, face darkening. "You're telling me she planted fake noise sensors to make your tractor seem louder than it is?" I nodded. He didn't even blink before saying, "That's criminal trespass, and if she forged readings, it's fraud. We're opening an investigation." That was the first time in a week I felt something like hope. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I had proof that Karen had crossed a legal line. The mayor arranged for a team to sweep the area for more devices, and they found 3 more hidden near the HOA's border wall, all broadcasting fake readings to a remote app titled Peace Tracker. The app, it turned out, had been created by Karen's other nephew, a college dropout who claimed to specialize in quiet urbanism. You couldn't make this stuff up. While the investigation began to unfold, I kept working the fields with Big Girl. Earl stuck around, claiming he didn't trust Karen's weasel-faced dog walkers, not to mess with the compost pile. He turned out to be right, as 2 HOA members were caught trying to toss rotten eggs into my irrigation canal, caught on camera and promptly shamed in a town Facebook group post that exploded with memes and outrage. But amid the chaos, something unexpected began to happen. People started showing up to help. A local restaurant sent their chef to pick up salvageable crop. A team of high schoolers volunteered to help pull weeds and load produce. The town's support wasn't just moral, it was hands-on. They were rallying behind me not just because Karen had gone too far, but because they saw the value of what I provided. And now, they were fighting for it too. Even still, I knew Karen wouldn't back down just because a few people posted angry comments online. She was calculating, obsessed, and clearly willing to bend or break rules. But now I had a new weapon in this fight, proof. Proof she was interfering with public food supply, faking noise violations, and scheming a hostile land grab. The only question was how far she'd go before it all came crashing down. And deep in my gut, I had the sinking feeling we hadn't seen the worst of her yet. By the time Friday rolled around, Karen's video had made its way out of her HOA echo chamber and into the broader town forums, and let's just say it didn't get the reception she was hoping for. Someone leaked it to the local Facebook group called Heart of Our Town, which had thousands of members. Within hours, it had been reposted, stitched with angry commentary, and broken down frame by local residents who were livid. Teachers from the school district commented that their lunch menus had been slashed in half. Nurses from the hospital chimed in, furious that dietary plans had been interrupted. One particularly snarky grandma wrote, "So Karen's golf cart crusade just cost my dialysis husband his favorite spinach? She's lucky all I've got is a crochet needle." The town wasn't just annoyed, they were fired up. That same morning, I finally met with Mark, a friend of mine who worked in property and municipal law. I brought the drone footage, the security cam videos of Karen's nephew planting fake sensors, and the so-called noise violation reports Karen had submitted, which were riddled with typos and inconsistencies. Mark took one look at the packet and said, "This is civil war disguised as paperwork. We're going on offense." He immediately filed for an emergency injunction to block the HOA's attempted land annexation. He also contacted the County Agricultural Board and submitted a formal complaint about interference with food supply, a rarely used but very real state-level violation. Karen had crossed more than just moral lines. She was now standing squarely in illegal territory. I went back home feeling like we'd finally scored a win. Grandpa Earl was pressure-washing the barn walls, muttering to himself about HOA saboteurs and whether paintball guns were technically legal on private property. I left him to it and focused on a new plan. If Karen was going to make this personal, I was going to make it public. Not just defensive, proactive. I pulled together friends, local business owners, and farmers for an emergency community meeting. We didn't meet in a boardroom or town hall. We met in my field, under the big oak tree that had stood since my great-grandfather plowed this land with a mule. That evening, nearly 60 people showed up. Some brought chairs, others stood with arms crossed and scowls on their faces. Among them were restaurant owners whose produce deliveries had been delayed, teachers whose lesson plans included nutrition projects that had to be scrapped, even the town librarian who normally didn't say much but came to drop off a petition with over 1,000 signatures demanding that Karen face consequences. I took the floor and told them everything. The sabotage, the tractor, the fake noise sensors, the land grab, all of it. By the time I finished, there were murmurs of legal action and a few people joking about forming a neighborhood watch against Karen's group. But out of that meeting came a real idea, a plan we called the Farmers Market Gambit. If Karen wanted to claim my land was a nuisance, we were going to prove just how much the town relied on it. We scheduled a massive pop-up farmers market for Sunday morning, not on my land, but just outside the HOA's decorative stone entrance sign. Technically public sidewalk space. Every farmer I knew agreed to participate. Vendors, food trucks, musicians, and even a guy with a llama signed up. It wasn't just going to be a protest, it was going to be a celebration of everything Karen wanted to silence. Sunday came fast. We started setting up at sunrise. Tents lined the sidewalk, tables stacked with squash, corn, lettuce, peaches, fresh eggs, you name it. Grandpa Earl, wearing a shirt that said, "Noise complaints are my cardio," patrolled the area with a whistle and a megaphone. Families came in droves. Children danced to banjo music. There were signs that read "Kale not control" and "Make farms not HOA drama." The mood was electric. Karen, naturally, was apoplectic. She stormed out of her house in fuzzy slippers and a bathrobe, shouting about unlawful assembly and threatening to call the police. Someone handed her a reusable shopping bag and offered her a zucchini. That only made her scream louder. She called her HOA board for backup, but half of them had already resigned or stopped answering her calls after the scandal broke. She stood there, red-faced, waving a binder of bylaws as the town's children painted signs that said, "Farmers feed us," in colorful chalk across the sidewalk. At one point, she tried to block the road with her golf cart again, but someone had filled the cup holder with beet juice, and she stormed off in defeat. Later that afternoon, the mayor showed up. Not in a suit, but in jeans and a plaid shirt, and he bought a whole basket of tomatoes. He stood next to me, looked out at the crowd, and said, "I haven't seen this much community spirit since the county fair. You're not just feeding people, Jake, you're anchoring the town." He paused, then added, "We're working on something big. She won't get away with this." The next day, a new scandal hit. Someone from inside the HOA, still anonymous, leaked internal emails showing that Karen had not only falsified noise data, but also redirected HOA funds to cover private legal advice and landscaping for her house. The emails included phrases like, "When we take over his land," and "Don't tell the board yet." It was all the smoking gun anyone needed. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted to suspend Karen indefinitely. She screamed about being framed, but the damage was done. Her name was now a punchline on every community forum. Someone even changed the name of her Wi-Fi network to Silent Tractor Zone. Meanwhile, I used the breathing room to secure backup farming equipment from a generous co-op program in the neighboring county. They loaned me a precision planter and a drone irrigation system, which Grandpa Earl insisted on calling the crop copter. I finally managed to resume deliveries, though behind schedule. The hospital was so relieved they gave me a standing ovation when I dropped off the produce crate, and one of the nurses tried to hug me with a full 4 tray in hand. But the strangest turn of all came that evening, when my story made it to the state senator's desk. Turns out, his sister worked in the nutrition department at the hospital and had been the one trying to reach me when Karen first sabotaged the tractor. She had told him everything, and now, he wanted to use my case to push forward a state-level bill protecting local farms from HOA interference. The senator called me personally and said, "You're the kind of farmer this state was built on. We're going to fix this, not just for you, but for every other Jake out there who's got a field and a Karen on the fence." That night, as the sun set behind the fields and the cicadas buzzed louder than Karen's complaints, I finally exhaled. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. I had the town behind me, legal firepower on my side, and a growing movement in my corner. And if Karen thought she could come back from this, she'd soon find out the hard way that when you mess with the food supply, you're going to get burned. By the following week, Karen's downfall was well underway, and yet, true to her nature, she doubled down instead of backing off. While the HOA had publicly suspended her and several members resigned in embarrassment, Karen managed to get a sympathetic HOA lawyer to represent her in a countersuit claiming emotional distress. She filed the lawsuit against me, of all people, alleging that the farmers' market had humiliated her, endangered her property values, and caused sleepless nights due to aggressive vegetable sales. I couldn't believe it. She actually put those words in an official filing. I read it twice just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. The absurdity would have been funny if it weren't real paper that could land in front of a judge. My attorney, Mark, nearly laughed himself out of his chair when I brought him the paperwork. But he wasn't taking it lightly. He said people like Karen thrive on dragging things out, and if we didn't punch back just as hard, she could gain traction by simply exhausting everyone around her. So we prepared. Mark filed a motion to dismiss the claim on grounds of baseless litigation, while also moving forward with the property interference charges and the complaint involving tampering with agricultural operations. Our evidence was solid. Karen's own leaked emails, the drone footage, the video from my barn, and even a testimonial from a nurse at the hospital whose patients suffered due to missed produce shipments. Still, it wasn't just about court anymore. It had become about something bigger. Support continued to pour in from across the town. Local reporters had picked up the story, and the narrative of HOA president destroys tractor, sabotages food supply quickly gained momentum. A news crew came out to the farm, interviewed me while I was loading lettuce into a delivery bin, and even got a few soundbites from Grandpa Earl, who told them, Karen thought she was the sheriff of suburbia, but she just deputized the whole dang town against her. The footage aired on regional TV that weekend and went semi-viral on social media. Karen, of course, saw it and immediately filmed a shaky cell phone video of herself crying on her porch, saying she was being bullied by agricultural extremists. The comments were not kind. Amid the chaos, something miraculous happened. A GoFundMe campaign someone from the hospital had started, without even telling me, reached over $200,000 in donations within 4 days. The page was titled, "Help Jake Feed the Town," and people gave whatever they could. Parents from the school chipped in. Restaurant customers donated. Even folks I didn't know, from towns hours away, left comments like, "We need more Jakes and less Karens in this world." With the money, I finally ordered a new tractor. This time a quiet, solar-powered model with smart GPS guidance. It wasn't just a replacement. It was an upgrade in every sense. And it made Karen's original complaint, noise, completely obsolete. When the new tractor arrived on a flatbed truck, the whole neighborhood came out to watch. Kids clapped. A marching band from the local high school played a few notes. It was like a victory parade in the middle of cornfields. Karen, of course, stayed inside, peeking out through her blinds like a villain in exile. The tractor was painted bright green with the words, "Powered by Community," stenciled across the side. Even Grandpa Earl shed a tear, though he claimed it was just dust in his eye from the gravel. But the most satisfying moment of all came during the first court hearing. Karen walked into the courtroom in a pristine beige suit, carrying a binder so thick it looked like it had its own table of contents. She had that same smug posture, the same narrowed eyes, as if she still believed she could spin this around. Her lawyer argued that Karen had suffered due to the farmer's market, claiming people harassed her and vandalized her yard by drawing smiling vegetables in chalk. When it was my turn, Mark stood and played the video of Karen attacking my tractor in slow motion. Her crowbar glinting in the light. Her voice screaming that she was doing the town a favor. Her nephew caught planting fake noise detectors. And finally, a recording of the mayor saying that Karen had put the entire food chain at risk. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for swift decisions, didn't say much. She listened carefully, nodded, and finally looked over her glasses at Karen. Her words were simple. What you did was not only dangerous, but reckless and disruptive to critical services. I'm ruling in favor of the defendant. She ordered Karen to pay restitution, which included damages to the tractor, loss of crop income, and legal fees. The total sum? Nearly $250,000. Karen's face drained of color like someone had pulled the power cord to her soul. But it didn't stop there. After the ruling, more consequences rolled in. The county revoked her HOA's right to operate without an external auditor. Karen's house was placed under financial review due to misuse of HOA funds. The HOA's remaining members publicly disbanded the organization, declaring it tainted by corrupt leadership. Karen's front lawn, once pristine, was now littered with realtor signs. Apparently, foreclosure proceedings had already started due to missed payments and legal penalties. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood with a pink binder and an iron will was now being crushed under the weight of her own self-importance. To celebrate, the town threw a massive event called Farmer Appreciation Day. It took place right in the open field where the pop-up market had been. There were booths, hay rides, cooking demonstrations, and even a corn-eating contest. I was handed the key to the city in front of a cheering crowd. A little girl gave me a drawing of a smiling carrot with a cape and said, "You're our vegetable superhero." Grandpa Earl was asked to give a speech, but instead led a line dance near the grain bins while holding up a sign that read, "Honk if you love compost." I finally felt the weight start to lift. Not because Karen was gone or punished, but because the town had shown up when it mattered. They had reminded me that community isn't about fences or bylaws. It's about people who care enough to stand with each other when it counts. Even the mayor danced a little that day, holding a bag of cucumbers and wearing a shirt that said, "Let us be united." But just when I thought we were done with Karen forever, I got a message from a friend in the zoning department. He'd seen a new application filed in a nearby county under the name K. Weston, asking for permission to build a serenity-focused co-housing development on the edge of a quiet farming village. The paperwork looked suspiciously familiar. The wording was the same. The mission statement used phrases like sound purity and visual alignment with neighborhood values. It was Karen trying to start over in a new town. I laughed, shook my head, and forwarded the news to Grandpa Earl, who immediately replied with one line, "Time to buy some portable sprinklers, just in case." But this time I wasn't worried, because Karen had learned a hard lesson, and I had something stronger than noise ordinances and crowbars. I had the whole town behind me. And we weren't letting anything or anyone tear that down again. The weeks that followed felt like stepping out of a long storm and into clear skies. With the new tractor humming quietly through the rows, the crops were thriving again, almost as if they'd been waiting for the drama to end. I could finally focus on the soil, the timing of harvests, and the simple satisfaction of watching green stretch across the fields in neat lines. The deliveries resumed on schedule, first to the hospital, then the school, and then back to every vendor who had stood by me during the chaos. The smiles I got when I pulled up to the loading docks were different now. They weren't just happy to see fresh produce. They were grateful. Grateful the madness had ended, grateful I hadn't given up, and maybe even a little proud to be part of something that had pushed back against something as cold and bureaucratic as HOA control gone mad. But as much as I wanted things to go back to normal, I knew better. Karen had tried to seize more than just land. She had tried to rewrite the rules of community, of decency. And while she had lost spectacularly, there were still cracks in the system that let someone like her nearly get away with it. It was those cracks that the state senator had promised to address when he called again, this time not just to thank me, but to invite me to speak before a panel in the State House. They were drafting new legislation to protect independent farms from HOA interference, and they wanted me to testify. I didn't think I had much to say to politicians, but I figured if it helped stop another Karen from destroying a tractor over noise complaints, I'd do it. The hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning. I showed up in clean jeans and a button-up shirt, feeling awkward in a room full of people in suits and lanyard. When they called my name, I stepped up to the microphone and simply told them the truth. I told them how my tractor had been destroyed, how my community had nearly lost its food supply, how a woman with no authority had almost managed to force a land grab using fake reports and noise sensors, and how it had taken public outrage, media attention, and the support of hundreds of people to undo the damage. When I finished, the room was quiet for a long second. Then someone clapped. Then another. The senator nodded to me and said, "That was more powerful than anything I could have written." The legislation passed by the end of the month. It included measures to ensure farms adjacent to residential areas couldn't be harassed by HOAs, strengthened penalties for tampering with agricultural equipment, and required transparency for any zoning complaints filed by non-owners. It even had a clause nicknamed the Jake Amendment. I didn't ask for that part, but I couldn't help but smile when I saw it printed. Back home, life slowly settled into its old rhythm, though with a few upgrades. The solar tractor became a local legend. People would stop by just to take pictures with it, and a reporter did a segment calling it, "The Quiet Revolution That Roared Through Silence." Grandpa Earl took the attention in stride, walking around the farm like a celebrity tour guide. He even wore a laminated badge that said, "Official Tractor Historian," and started telling visitors that the original Big Girl tractor was forged during the Great Dust Bowl and powered by pure stubbornness. But just as things were beginning to feel peaceful, Karen made her final desperate play. I had just finished inspecting a new hydroponic setup when I got a call from Deputy Harlan. He asked if I had been near my equipment that morning. I said yes, just a couple hours ago. He told me I needed to come down to the station. Someone had been caught on camera dumping sugar into the fuel tank of my brand new tractor. The footage was clear. It was Karen, dressed in all black, wearing oversized sunglasses, and carrying a plastic bag full of white granules like a cartoon villain. What made it even more ridiculous was that she had accidentally triggered the new security system, which not only filmed her from 3 angles but also set off a silent alarm that pinged both my phone and the sheriff's office. They caught her red-handed, literally, as some of the sugar spilled and mixed with grease, leaving a sticky residue all over her hands and sleeves. Her excuse, as always, was unbelievable. She claimed she thought it was a compost additive, and she was just trying to help me with my organic mission. No one believed her. Not the sheriff, not the town, not even her own lawyer, who reportedly tried to withdraw from representing her after seeing the footage. She was arrested on the spot for criminal mischief, trespassing, and violation of her court order. By the time the court processed her charges, Karen had become a cautionary tale. Her house was sold at auction to cover legal fees. Her name was scrubbed from every HOA document in the state, and she was banned from forming or joining any HOA organization within the county. The judge even ordered her to attend a conflict resolution course titled Community Living Without Control. When she left town, no one came to see her off. Not even the few neighbors who used to support her. She had burned every bridge and salted the earth behind her. In the aftermath, the town decided to do something symbolic. They erected a small sign at the edge of my property where the HOA fence had once stood. It read, "This land feeds us. Protect it." Nothing fancy. No politics. Just a reminder that some things matter more than trimmed hedges and quiet mornings. The sign was surrounded by a flower bed planted by schoolchildren, and people started leaving little tokens, painted rocks, tiny flags, even thank you note. One note simply read, "Because of you, my kid eats vegetables now." I kept working, of course. That's what farmers do. The new tractor made everything smoother, and the hydroponic system began producing greens faster than expected. I donated part of the surplus to the school and hospital every week. And once a month, we held a community picnic in the field. No agenda, no speeches. Just good food, open sky, and the sound of laughter that no one ever tried to silence again. And then came a letter. It was addressed to me in neat cursive handwriting with no return address. Inside was a photo of a small apartment balcony filled with potted plants, tomatoes, basil, peppers, and a short note that read, "Your farm made me rethink a lot. I'm growing now too. KW." There was no doubt in my mind who sent it. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was a twisted attempt at closure. Or maybe, just maybe, Karen had finally learned something. I didn't reply. But I did tape the photo to my fridge, right next to a kid's drawing of a carrot wearing sunglasses. Life, like farming, is about cycles. Things grow, things wither, and sometimes things come back stronger than before. I never expected a neighborhood feud to turn into a state law or a community movement. But when it did, I learned that resilience isn't just about surviving what gets thrown at you. It's about planting deeper roots when others try to uproot you. And it's about knowing that even the quietest seed can grow loud enough to shake the ground, if the soil is strong and the people stand together. So now, when I roll out of bed at sunrise, coffee in one hand and the sun just touching the horizon, I don't worry about the noise. I just fire up that solar tractor, let it hum across the earth, and get to work. Because the land is louder than Karen ever was. And thank God for that.